So you have a little angling type of scenario, and if I read your email correctly, it's quite a doozy, but I think that a lot of people can learn from it because I think it's quite common when you're playing against certain types of opponents. So why don't you give us a little bit of backstory here? Where are you playing out of, firstly?
I'm playing out of the Oaks in Emeryville, California.
Okay, the Oaks. What's the size of the game?
It's a 1-2-3 game
One, two,
with a
three.
max buy-in of 500.
So max buy-in 500. This is the one where they do like the small blind one, right? Or something on the button.
Small blind on the button.
500 max buy-in. Yep.
Right.
And how deep are you in this hand?
Me, I'm like 800.
Okay. So why don't you run through the hand for us real quick?
And the effective stack is 600.
Okay. So 600 effective. Okay.
The problem is that it was a while ago, and I've kind of been peer pressured into making this call, and I didn't really want to, but I think it's for the good of the game.
Okay. No problem. So you're doing a service.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't you run through the hand? Oh, okay. So I'm going to read through the email that you sent me here really quick here. So you sent me an email saying that I arrive on the river, heads up in position. Okay.
That's correct.
And the villain pushed his entire stack forward, completely over the line, but kept one finger on the rear chip stack. So on the river, you arrive with the nuts. On the river, Hero arrives with the nuts, probably the nut flush. And your opponent goes out and goes out to put a very large bet out on the river, like a whole stack, right? On the river?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember it being like basically an exactly pot size bet.
Okay.
Like
So
$400 into a $400 pot.
okay. So on the river, OP bets 400 into 400. Hero has the nuts, and I'm sure that you were pretty excited about it. And what did you do when you saw the bet?
I instantly flicked in a chip.
So he puts out a chip stack. You think he's all in, or he makes this bet. Well, obviously, you think he's all in because you have the nuts, and you don't say anything, but you flip out like a single chip as a call.
Correct.
And okay, so it's obvious that you call him because you've got the nuts very quickly. And then what happens?
He then taps the table twice. No, he first rejoins the stack with his free hand and draws the entire stack back behind the line, taps the table twice, and mucks his hand.
So he goes out.
It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
So he goes out and puts his entire stack in. You flick in the chip call, and then he goes with his other hand and takes it back and brings it back in front of the line. And I assume that you made a big stink about this. Didn't you say to the dealer, didn't he just bet all in?
I did. I made a stink.
And what did they say?
They called the floor over.
Okay.
And the floor said something to the effect of, if you never release the chips from your hands, then the bet was never made.
So this guy was still holding on to his chip stack when he made the bet, supposedly.
So one of the 4 stacks he put out there, he was holding on with his thumb and index finger.
Oh, that's... So one of the 4 stacks that he put out there, he was still holding on, and they ruled that it wasn't a bet. That's such a terrible, terrible ruling by the floor guy, even if it's consistent to, I don't know what, again, in a cash game, there aren't really consistent rules across all different rooms. So there might be something written in the Oaks rules where somebody might have to release with their hand in order for it to be a bet. But there's a couple of things going on here. Number one, I think that what people need to learn too when they make the nuts at the end, and what I would have done in your situation, just based upon years and years of experience, is it's exciting to make the nuts. You're all super happy, especially when you have the nuts and someone's about to bet into you. I will, just as a gut reflex now from my experience playing the table, say, is he all in? Is he all in? Now, do the dealers have all in discs there at the Oaks?
They do. And it happened so quickly that I may have beat the dealer into the pot with my chip.
That's that's really what the issue is. I'm not saying, some people are going to say, oh, it's the caller's fault. I mean, I think the guy's a huge angler, but we want to protect ourselves. I'm sure that you would never do this again, right? You probably will never make such a fast call again with the nuts.
No.
Yeah. You need to pause. You need to pause. If the dealers have these all-in placards, wait for the placard to go in, or at least confirm that someone is actually all in. I actually had a gigantic can. For some reason, I just thought of this back like in 2008 when I was traveling around for Poker Road. I used to travel all the way around. It was one of the first media gigs that I had, and I was playing a huge game at Foxwoods. And there was a situation where I had the nut flush on the river. Like I had made the nut flush on the river. I think I had led into the preflop razor with a flush draw, and he had called. And I made the nuts on the turn. And I bet again, and he made this ridiculous overbet all in for like $13,000 into like a $2,000 pot. And I was just like, and I remember it because it was one of the biggest pots I ever won. I said, is he all in? This was before they had those all in discs. Because I had the nuts, right? But I wanted to confirm that he was all in. If you can get that confirmation, that's absolute gold. And there's plenty of people, there's scummy, scamming anglers out there, and you just ran into one of them right then and there. The other thing that we've talked about of note is that even if the floor had come over and had ruled in your favor, I don't think that they can force the guy to actually put the money in the pot, especially in California. Like if you don't physically put the money in the pot, and I know he had moved forward with his chips, they can't make the guy actually put the money in the pot. A better example of this is if the guy even verbally said to you all in and you said call, and then everybody heard him say all in, you call, like say you snap call, and he says, I'm not all in. And everyone heard him say all in, the dealer confirmed that card room cannot force him to put the chips in the pot. They'll throw the guy out, they'll bar the guy, and if it's a good room, they'll never let the guy come back until he pays out the all-in, but they can't take the money from the guy. Your only recourse is to actually, in California, sue him in small claims court. And what we've seen from the whole Apostle thing is that courts have said that they do not want to litigate situations dealing with gambling between private parties. There's a precedent for them not litigating it. So there isn't really anything that you can do. The weird thing about that, though, is it's like, say you play on a regular basis, and it's like, well, am I going to physically make a guy put all his chips in if he says all in? If a guy says all in and the dealer puck is in the pot, am I going to say, please put the chips? Nobody does that, right? But at least you should know that you can't get, if you ever ran into a guy who had some sort of history of that. I don't know if I've ever come across a situation where I've actually forced a guy to put chips into the pot, but especially in California and other places, they have to put the chips in the pot. Now, I think in terms of a ruling, that's a horrifically bad ruling. But the other thing, too, that I don't like and I never do is I never do that one chip call because I think it causes a lot of confusion. I know a lot of people do that. They do it a lot in tournaments. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think it just can cause a lot of confusion. When I call, I actually put my chips in the pot, or I'll just say call, just so that there's no gray area with like the single flick chip. I assume that everybody. Now, what did the other people at the table say?
Categorically agreed with me and against the ruling.
But the dealer was just like, and you're saying that he had his hand on one stack, but they weren't even going to force him to put the other stacks that he had like released. Yeah, that's just
So I just racked up and left, and I haven't been back since.
Yeah, I hate the ruling. But I think that there is something to learn from this, though, too, is that when you have the nuts, especially when you're in position and you're facing like an all-in bet, just wait. Just pause.
I appreciate the criticism because it's constructive.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm going to try and take it and use it moving forward. I don't want this to ever happen to me or anyone else again.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you calling it in. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Some other people saying here in the live chat, what about the betting line? Wherever I don't even know if I've run it. I mean, there might be rooms with their local rules where the betting line means something. In California, as far as I know. The betting line doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of a guide. It doesn't really, because there are certain situations where the rules, as I think that they should be, are left open for interpretation, where if somebody like makes a motion like they're betting, or a motion like they're calling, that's actually going to be a call or a bet. So the betting line has nothing to do with like where somebody, is going to necessarily determine whether something is a bet or a call. But if if you get a chance, if you're listening to this and that ever happens to you, anybody, low stakes, mid stakes, high stakes, there's a lot of scummy people out there. So you got to protect yourself because no one else is going to protect you.